At night, when the moon casts shadows on crumbling tombstones, we ask, what really lies beneath the myths of vampires? Is Dracula just a gothic fairy tale villain, or is there something deeper, older, hauntingly human in the origins of the undead? Imagine waking in your grave, staked by your own community, or being accused of bringing death to your neighbors simply because you were first to fall ill. These weren't stories in horror novels, they were lived fears in times when science was powerless. Today, we journey back not into fiction, but into folklore, history, and even archaeology to unearth how the myth of the vampire truly began. Because truth, sometimes, is more chilling. From remote villages to epidemics that swept across continents, from desperate rituals to gruesome graveyards, the vampire myth is woven with grief, guilt, misunderstanding, and human imagination. Let's begin centuries before Bram Stoker, before Gothic novels, even before modern hospitals, with ancient civilizations where fear of the dead returning had a name. In Babylon, there was Lilichu or Lilith. Lilith, a demon figure that preyed on infants. In ancient Greece, legends told of Lamia, a woman transformed, sucking blood from children. In Persia, myths show monstrous beings linked to life force training. Even among early Chinese folklore, there are specters, restless corpses, wandering spirits that stalk the living. Move forward into Slavic, Balkan, and Eastern European folklore, and the myths grow more detailed. In Russia, Poland, Serbia, Greece, Romania, versions of the undead were part of everyday belief. The terminology differs: Vidaluk, Vukodluk, Apir, etc. But the core, a being, dead, yet restless, perhaps able to harm the living. These myths often emerged where death came fast: plague, tuberculosis, famine, body that decays unusually slowly, or one that seems to totter when buried, signs interpreted not as biology, but as evil. What's important, most of these traditions didn't imagine pale aristocrats with capes. They saw neighbors, relatives, people of flesh, with dark skin from sun, folks of simple dress. The undead were often ugly, swollen, the signs of rigor mortis, decomposition misread under fear. If people believed the dead might return, what did they do? Many villages had rituals, some gruesome, to lock down the departed. Examples: graves with stakes driven through the chest, sometimes beheadings, sometimes placing sickle blades or nets over graves in some German regions, nets full of knots to confound restless corpses, face-down burials to prevent the corpse from rising. In New England, during colonial era, families exhume fresh corpses if a disease continues to ravage, slicing out hearts, burning them, even drinking concoctions of ash or blood to halt the spread. One striking case: in Griswold, Connecticut, a body labeled JB was found in a cemetery with the bones rearranged, skull placed in the chest, leg bones crossed, possibly a skull and crossbones motif, if someone believed the corpse stood as threat even after death. These burial modifications were logic in their own framework: protect the living, restore order. Whether religious belief, fear of contagion, or a mixture, often all three. A critical ingredient in the vampire myth was disease. For centuries, people saw death and suffering, but lacked tools to understand them. Consumption, now known as tuberculosis, devastated communities. It caused weight loss, coughing, spitting blood, night sweats. A family might see several members fall ill, then one dies, then more. Lacking germ theory, suspicion turned inward. Perhaps the first to die was the cause. Also, decomposition can do strange things. Bodies swell, gas build-up. Skin tightens, then sloughs off, discoloration. Sometimes fluid leakage, which looks like fresh blood in soil. The breathing of a body that has been declared dead, but wasn't fully so rare, but possible in older times. Muffled moans, shifting bones, etc. Add to that the rituals around wakes, watching over the dead, sometimes opening coffins. Beliefs that eyes look alive, that fresh skin seems beneath the lips, etc. These are natural processes misperceived as supernatural. In Eastern Europe in the 1700s, Official medical officers even reported exhuming bodies believed to be vampires. The corpse looked fresh, fluids, etc., and driven to stake through the heart. These reports, while embellished, often catalogue real natural phenomena. Let's bring this closer to home. Stories that were recorded, passed down, that show the human side of this shadowy myth. The Tillinghast tragedy. New England colonial era. In Rhode Island, Stalkley Tillinghast suffered loss of several children. When death kept coming, his family believed the first to die child, Sarah, had become a vampire. They exhumed her body, found her flesh less decayed, hearts removed, burned. Some of the remaining children recovered. Later historians found she died of consumption tuberculosis, but at a slightly different time than oral tradition said. Still, the fear and grief were very real. Mercy Brown. In 1890s Rhode Island, a young woman named Mercy Brown died. When her brother died soon after, her family, suspecting vampirism, exhumed her corpse. Her heart was still fresh. They burned it, mixed ash with water, which was made into a remedy, taken perhaps by family members to ward off disease. The case of J.B. in Griswold, Connecticut. Archaeologists uncovered an 18th century cemetery with one very unusual burial. The bones were disrupted. Some post-mortem rearrangements, suggestive of someone believing the dead still had power, coinciding with signs of tuberculosis found in the skeleton. Vlad the Impaler. Vlad III Dracula, a 15th century ruler in what is now Romania, infamous for brutal punishments, impalement, mutilation, etc. No evidence he thought of himself as supernatural, nor that people of his time believed he was a vampire. But his extreme violence, his geography Transylvania, Balkans, and his name Dracula, son of Dracula, became fuel for literary imagination. With the 19th and early 20th centuries came something new: mass media, literature, national identity, romanticism, which transformed the undead. Bram Stoker's Dracula, 1897, did not invent the vampire, but synthesized many threads: aristocratic count with a castle, exotic Eastern Europe, seduction, forbidden romance, shadows, and supernatural powers. This fiction shaped how the world views vampires. Films amplified it. Bela Lugosi's perfect accent, his cape. Later films added bats, fangs, transformation, pale skin, aversion to sunlight. These elements have little basis in older folklore, but they became standards, expectations. Meanwhile, rationalist thought, science, medicine pushed back, disease understood. Bodies no longer feared as haunted, medical definition of death refined. Yet paradoxically, this scientific advance made vampires more popular. Fascination with the forbidden, the bloody, the uncanny. If modern science can explain much, why does the vampire myth persist? Psychological needs. Death is final. Myths give shape to grief, guilt, blame. In times of crisis, people need someone or something to blame. Symbolic meaning. Vampires aren't just monsters. They represent disease, taboo desire, the fear of contagion, the fear of the other. They make visible what's hidden. Cultural identity. For some regions, the folklore is part of history and tradition. Even when institutions mock or dismiss belief, communities preserve stories, local rituals, entertainment and reinvention, because the myth is flexible. Artists, writers, filmmakers reshape it. Each generation gets its vampire: romantic, brutal, sympathetic, monstrous. From tombs and graves, from epidemics and nightmares, the vampire myth crawled into our collective imagination, twisted, reshaped, magnified by literature, film, and fear. The Count Dracula, he's a beautiful fiction. But the trembling corpse, the loss, the disease, the fear of the unknown, those were all real. Next time you see a vampire movie, or read a tale of the undead, remember, the myth isn't just about blood and horror. It's about our attempts to understand death, to wrestle with what we fear most. Thank you for journeying through time, myth, and flesh. Stay curious, stay awake.